All right, everyone. Welcome back to JPC Spiritual Talk. It's Jared Campbell. So today we have a lot to cover. So we're going to jump right into it and get this done. We're first going to talk about Hezbollah, IDF, and Israel. And then we're going to talk about Russian advances both in Ukraine and Africa. There's things happening in Africa that aren't being reported about as much or talked about. So we're going to cover some of that today. We're also going to listen to a friend of mine who's living in Ukraine. He's going to mention Belogrod, a town in Russia, how it's being actively bombed by Ukrainian forces with drones. That doesn't get reported a lot either, so we're going to cover that as well. We're also going to watch some videos that are relating to the conflict in Africa. That's how we'll end out this segment. So without further ado, let's kind of jump into this. Okay, so get our screen shared over. All right, so up on your screen, there's two articles that are going to go together. This one and the next one. We're just going to kind of go over them. We're only going to watch a few videos, right, from this main article. So in recent televised address, the Hezbollah leader warned Cyprus against supporting Israel in any potential conflict. He stated that if Cyprus allows its bases and airports to be used by the Israeli military for attacks on Lebanon, Hezbollah will consider Cyprus an active participant in the war and target it accordingly. He also emphasized Hezbollah's preparedness, claiming they have over 100,000 fighters and a wide array of missiles ready to strike without restrictions across the Mediterranean. Additionally, Hezbollah released a 9 to 10 minute video, which we're only going to see a minute of, with another video as well, showing detailed reconnaissance footage. Okay, so the video, allegedly filmed by an Iranian-made drone, featured strategic locations such as Israeli arms company, a military complex, and Iron Dome missile defense installations. This escalation has prompted warnings by Israel and other analysis from military experts confirming the authenticity and strategic nature of the footage, making it a significant upgrade in Hezbollah's tactical capabilities. So here we go with this short video. This one's a minute 44. Here we go.
I also must draw the attention of the government of Cyprus. We have information that the Israelis, the enemy's army, every year is conducting military drills in Cyprus, in mountainous areas, similar to the terrain in Lebanon, in southern Lebanon, and they use airports in Cyprus. We also have information that the Israelis are assuming that in the next war, if it was to take place, that their resistance in Lebanon will attack the airports and other places, and hence will use, in its war on Lebanon, they will use the airports and bases in Cyprus, the Cypriotic airports and bases. Of course, we referred this information to officials in the Lebanese state when the president of Cyprus was here. They conveyed this message, and he said no, but this is true, and the Israelis are talking about it. They also show documentaries about their drills in Cyprus. In brief, in light of the prevailing environment, the Cypriotic government must be aware that opening the airports and bases in Cyprus for the Israeli army to attack Lebanon means that the Cypriotic government will become a party to the war, and the resistance will deal with it as if it's a party to the war.
So we've talked about drone warfare before. This one, it's muted just in case it has music, right? So it should be muted. Yes. So we've talked about the warfare, drone warfare before, right? How it's changing the landscape, right? Hezbollah is getting really good at using drones. So is Hamas. Hezbollah is probably helping Hamas. We see in Ukraine, the Ukrainians are good at using drone warfare, even the Russians. We even seen it in the Chinese. We've seen it also in Iran, right? Even here in the US, we have really good drone technology. So drone warfare is becoming this new thing, which I would imagine will give any military a crap load of problems. Think about it. Drones are hard to defend, right? They're very hard to defend. So these two articles go together, basically talking about the same thing, right? Talking about the other military analysts, talking about what's happening here with Hezbollah and Israel. So we're going to move on to our next article. So we're going to talk about a huge ammunition. So a huge ammunition depot of the French army was blown up in Chad. What a shame. You'll not be able to send them to Ukraine, says the Russians. So a large ammunition depot belonging to the French army in Chad's capital exploded, resulting in at least 9 dead and 46 injuries. The explosions caused widespread damage, including to nearby homes and an airport. The Chadian president inspected the devastation, which left a significant crater and debris. The incident, which happened from Tuesday night into Wednesday, has raised concerns about potential increases in the death toll due to the severity of some injuries. Russian sources have suggested that the depot, the largest in Chad, was targeted as part of sabotage operation against NATO and pro-Western countries. They claim the explosions prevented the ammunition from being sent to Ukraine, mocking the situation. This incident is part of a pattern of mysterious explosions at Ukrainian military facilities and their allies worldwide.
Abo. Abi bu ne ya?
Bu ne abi şeyi tam burayı aydınlattı ya.
Abo. Abo. Oğlum bina...
It's going to make me go out, isn't it? Sometimes it does that. I do apologize for that sometimes. Sometimes it gets frustrating, and I do apologize. Which one was it? I think it was this one. Yeah. There's just a few videos in here of that. Here's another one. Another 10-second shot, right? To start seeing what the Serbian president is saying, right? The train has left the station, right? So things are getting very interesting. So our next article, 0 hour. Russian brigades launch surprise general attack in central Donetsk, crush Ukrainian fortresses. Russian entrapment of thousands of Ukrainians. They entered New York. So it's talking about probably a strip, not actual New York, right? So here we go. So Russian brigades launch a surprise general offensive in central Donetsk, breaking through Ukrainian defenses and aiming to encircle Ukrainian forces and a pincher movement. The attack spans 5 fronts, targeting key locations, right? Russian forces advancing from, let's look at some of these areas. So I can't pronounce these very well, so you guys can kind of see them right there on your screen. Here are some videos. So basically, the offensive surprised Ukrainian forces, likely facilitated by the redeployment of some Ukrainian units towards Kharkiv. Ukrainian analysts acknowledged the success of the Russian advances and ongoing active hostilities and artillery exchanges in the region. Okay, so here are some videos. And I'll make sure it's muted. So that one was an offensive on New York. A powerful strikes buried Ukrainian armed forces units in the Tortix, what direction? Video, Russian shelling of Ukrainian forces in the area. So Russian bombings in the New York Tortex region. We're not going to watch all these. We're going to move on. So the link is in the description box. I just wanted to cover this article because it is reporting Russian advances in Ukraine, which was one of the talking points I said at the beginning that we were going to cover. So Russian is making advances in Ukraine, right? According to War News 24/7. Okay, there's videos in here. All right, so our next one on the mark here. We're going to talk about Belogrod, but first, before we do that, we're going to listen to a recording of a friend of mine who is currently in Ukraine. So we're going to listen to his recording. We're not going to listen to all of his recording. I'm going to stop it at some point, right? So just want you all to listen to what he's saying. He lives in Ukraine, right?
By the way, Jared, I'll tell you something, which was not really reported on, but I guess in some ways, every once in a while now it is reported on. You know, I told a friend, which then he later changed the meaning of what I told him. And he was in the politics, and then he later told me in front of a bunch of Republicans and on my Facebook that I'm a Nazi or I'm a Nazi sympathizer or I'm into child exploitation or some stupid strange shit. With this Russian-Ukrainian war, when in the first week or two, okay, there was some stuff that went on that talked about how the Ukrainian military was shelling and bombing Belgorod, okay? I told 3 or 5 friends, I'm going, I keep seeing videos of a Russian city being.
So I paused for a second, right? He mentioned that here in Belogrod, he said it doesn't get talked about or reported enough. And so he had told me that. So this morning when I was listening, when I woke up, I had the voice message from him. So Ukrainian forces reportedly attacked Russian military positions in Belogrod using ATACMS missiles fired from HIMARS systems days after receiving U.S. approval to use American weapons on Russian soil. This happened probably a few weeks ago. Okay. A video shared on Russian Telegram account shows a Russian S-300-400 air defense system in flames following the attack. Russian officials confirmed the attack, stating that the missiles targeted civilian areas but were successfully intercepted. Additionally, there were reports of destroyed ammunition depots and other heavy weaponry near the Ukraine border. Though these claims remain unconfirmed by either side, U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken announced that President Biden authorized Ukraine to use U.S. weapons against Russian military targets near the border, excluding long-range weapons like the ATACMS. Okay? So this is what this is talking about, right? So if you look at the date, right, it happened, this was June 5th. The way they do their dates, 06 is June, the 5 is the day, right? Then 2024. So June 5th, right, 2024, right? So let's kind of scroll through here. Here is a video. Let's watch this really quick. It's about a 10-second video. Now, I can honestly say the reason Russia is upset that Ukraine is striking in their territory is because they're using weapons from NATO, right? I don't think that the Russians would be completely upset if they were using their own weapons, but they're using weapons that are from the NATO countries. I think that's why Russia has an issue with it. Either or, doesn't matter how it's debated, right? Yes, Russia invaded Ukraine, shouldn't have happened. Yes, Russia fires in Ukraine. Ukraine should have the right to fire back into Russia. Absolutely. I get all that, right? I'm just explaining from the sources that I know why Russia is upset because they're using NATO weapons, if that makes sense, right? And this is something that's not really reported on. And so with my friend who's in Ukraine, and when he sent me that voice recording this morning, I thought about looking into it more and giving it some justice, if that makes sense, right? So without further ado, let's finish this out, right? So our last little thing we're going to talk about is something that's happened about a month ago, okay? Happened back in May, but doesn't get a whole lot of recognition. So U.S. destabilization. Russian forces storm U.S. base in Niger. Base is now Russian. Leave immediately. So this one's an interesting article. Most of you probably not heard about this. So let's talk about this. So Russian forces recently stormed the U.S. the 101st Air Force Base in Niamey, Niger, taking control without resistance. About 60 Russian soldiers, part of a newly formed African Army Corps, demanded the Americans evacuate the base following the Nigerian government's cancellation of the defense agreement with the U.S. This event has sparked outrage in the U.S., with Republicans criticizing the Biden administration for international humiliation. The Pentagon confirmed the incursion, emphasizing that U.S. troops and equipment remain secure. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin downplayed the situation, stating the Russians were in a separate compound. Approximately 900 U.S. troops are stationed in Niger. The takeover marks a significant geopolitical shift, as Russian forces, including former Wagner PMC, private military group, members have begun deploying across the Sahel region, replacing French forces. They will train local troops and protect high-ranking officials in Burkina Faso, Libya, Mali, Niger, and Central African Republic. This development highlights a significant setback for U.S. policy in Africa and could have widespread implications. So here are a few videos before we close out on this.
Our partner countries, Italy and Germany, you would think they would help us facilitate medicine and supplies, but they won't even help transport needed materiel to our service members because they're worried about being expelled from the country. And if that isn't worse, the fact that we've got Russia as the preferred security partner now means there are Russians behind the wire at Air Base 101. We have Russians on our base somewhere. That would never happen. But the only reason it's happening is because Blinken and Biden are humiliated that their plan failed, that they poured $500 million into this country where now we're being thrown out by the scruff of our neck. Well, Joe Biden and Tony Blinken's failures should not have to be visited on the 1,100 service members there who are there fighting for us, wanting to do patriotic duty, and are being held hostage, and they are being stranded. And I will fight for them. And I will fight against this administration that would use our service members as pawns because they can't get their act together. Just because Biden and Blinken can't say oops doesn't mean we should abandon our troops. March 16th, 2023, Secretary Blinken calls Niger, quote, a model of resilience, a model of democracy, a model of cooperation. 1 year and 1 day later, Dr. Wallander, the spokesperson of the Nigeri military, Colonel Amadou Amabrame, says, quote, the American presence in the territory of the Republic of Niger is illegal. A year and a day after our government said they were the model of resilience and democracy, they are throwing us out by the scruffs of our neck. And so is it safe to say that this failed, General Langley?
It's safe to say that there's no correlation or causation of U.S. training to a coup happening.
Well,
period.
I mean, we've spent more than $500 million in the country. What can you say we've got for that $500 million as we sit here today?
There was a buy down on an insurance policy for protecting the homeland.
Okay, but General Langley, you went to Niger and you went to have a meeting with the people we trained who overthrew the democratically elected government, and Fox News is reporting that you didn't even get a meeting with the principal decision maker. Is that right?
I had a meeting with my counterpart.
Well, here's the quote. Sources say last week's meeting with the junta was extremely difficult. The administration's envoys did not get to meet with Niger's principal decision maker. Is that a true statement or is that a false statement?
My responsibility is to meet with my counterpart, not.
I would just hope that if we train the two leaders, we could at
time.
least book a meeting, you know, since it's the model of democracy.
Всем привет! Мы находимся в Нигере. Разместили нас хорошо, кормят отлично, стреляем мы великолепно, свое дело знаем, никого не боимся, делимся опытом с местной армией, готовы к выполнению поставленных задач в отпуске не хотим. Служим России.
So that was an African course on his Telegram channel, has just posted images of the base where the instructors were stationed in Niger. In a recent report, it was published that the Russian troops are in a different hangar, but on the same base as the U.S. troops. Okay?
Although we are a partner of France in NATO, we don't have the freedom to buy the weapons we want. Even with our own money, we didn't have access to certain types of equipment that were denied to us by our traditional partners. We sided with Russia because it offers us the opportunity to equip ourselves militarily, to equip our space to ensure its security.
Russia is like a guarantee for the African people, for Niger in particular. We are here to support the CNSP and its ideology vis-a-vis Russia. Russia as a country is welcome here. As long as they respect our ideologies, our commitments, we have a win-win cooperation.
Okay. So before we close out, check my time here. Not too bad, not too bad, not too bad. Hope I didn't go too fast. But hope at the same time you all understand how I kind of put that together, right? So as we can see how it keeps ratcheting up, right? Also pay attention to what's going on in Israel. That's a big thing too. Israel is a good indication, right, of what's coming, right? Especially considering like end times type stuff. Always watch towards Israel, right? Ukraine, it's interesting, right? NATO is going to have to get drawn into this, because if NATO doesn't, right, then Ukraine will be destroyed. See, how I understand and how it's been explained to me, that Ukraine, so much money was put into Ukraine in order for it to exhaust the Russians, right? That was the whole point. The Ukrainian army was supposed to be big enough to basically tire out the Russians, right? And as I had mentioned, NATO wants to invade Russia now, that it seems like, and split up in 5 parts. So in a way, they created Ukraine in a way to tire out the Russians and then to advance their own agenda. But the thing is, are the Russians worn out in Ukraine? That answer is still yet to be answered, because, I've seen from my own eyes that the Russians don't seem to be slowing down, but actually gaining, right? According to reports, and actually speeding up. So the opposite has happened. So we know, right? So these are all interesting stuff, and that's why I'm thankful to have a friend in Ukraine who helps keep me in the loop. At the same time, help my understanding so I can help you all understand, right? We see a war shaping up, East against West. Right? At any moment, China can take Taiwan. It's going to draw us into. So look at some of my videos and take a look at them. It was my pleasure to bring you all things that don't get talked about as much. Talking about an old article, I think was pretty cool, because I didn't know what was happening in Africa. And now I'm going to try and keep up with that as well, with everything else, because it all ties into our discussion with World War III, right? We see U.S. being pushed out of areas, and Russia's coming in and making gains, right? Russia's not only making gains in Ukraine, but like I said in my opening, they're making gains in Africa and all over the world, right? So there's a paradox shift happening, right? New superpowers are rising while old superpowers are falling, right? It's what it seems like so far. And the only way to survival is through nukes, right? I don't see any country surviving without going nuclear, right? I think at some point it will, and it has the potential to go nuclear. So we should watch out for that. Without further ado, let's get off here. I love you all so much. Thanks for listening. JPCE Spiritual Talk. Jared Wesley Campbell. I'm out.